If an animal isn't killed but is still forced to produce milk or eggs, is this still a problem?
Well, again, if we substitute an animal species who is, who we haven't learned to become so desensitized toward, we might have a different response to this, or substitute a human being for this, right? So when we're talking about something like dairy production, when we think about forced impregnation, if we substitute another type of being for that, whether it's a dog or whether it's a cat or whether it's a human or a being who we have not been socialized to perceive as edible, as in this classification of animals, we can recognize that forcing somebody to become pregnant when it is not their choice, taking their baby away from them so that you can harvest their milk for yourself and your own species, and doing this again and again and again for the entire course of a lifetime, can never be not problematic.
What impact does animal agriculture have on the environment?
Well, fortunately, this conversation is happening more, this question is being asked more and more widely. The United Nations has said that animal agriculture is one of the most significant contributors to some of the most serious problems facing the world today, facing the environment today, not the least of which, of course, is climate change. Animal agriculture is also a key driver of deforestation, desertification, fresh water depletion, and more.
Why should people have empathy for a pig, cow, or chicken? Do we even know if they care how they're treated?
Well, I think it's not a question of why people should have empathy for other animals, but we do have empathy for other animals. We know research has shown that we actually are hardwired to feel empathy for others. Most people cringe when faced with images of animals suffering, and those who don't are of concern. And we know this. So we do naturally feel empathy for others. We simply tend not to feel empathy for those animals we've been socialized to emotionally disconnect from through Carnism. But even there, when we connect with an individual of one of these species, our natural empathy comes back. For example, we may go to petting zoos and pet the piglets before walking into the adjacent grocery store and buying bacon and ham. So most people know this. There's also ample evidence demonstrating the sentience of non-human beings, something that most people know intuitively. And thankfully, there's more and more research coming out demonstrating the sentience of fish and some crustaceans as well.
What's your prediction of where the vegan movement will be in 10 years?
I don't know where we're going to be in 10 years, to be honest. What I do see, however, and can speak to, is that the trajectory of Carnism, the direction that Carnism as a system is heading in, is following the direction of, or the trajectory of, other oppressive systems. So like, for example, patriarchy expressed through sexism or heterosexism, for instance. When a behavior becomes a choice, it takes on an ethical dimension it didn't have in quite the same way before. And for many people today, they're eating animals not because they have to, but because they choose to. Now, of course, some people are economically unable to make their food choices freely, or geographically unable to make their food choices freely. But for the people who can make their food choices freely, they appear to be becoming increasingly uncomfortable with the idea of eating animals. When you look at, oppression and atrocities throughout human history, these atrocities were often largely made possible through getting the populace to believe that supporting the violence was necessary for survival of the nation, survival of, the gender, for example, survival of the race. that oppression was necessary in order to ensure the survival of one particular group. We no longer have the arguments to stand on that eating animals is necessary for human survival or even for human well-being. In fact, more and more evidence is mounting that just the opposite is true. And so carnism is becoming increasingly destabilized, not only because of this, evidence mounting of how problematic it is to be eating animals, but because of the connection between animal agriculture and climate change, and because there are more and more, options for people who don't want to eat animals anymore. There's more and more awareness thanks to the internet. So carnism is becoming increasingly destabilized, and veganism as an ideology and as a movement is really starting to flourish and take off. I don't know where we're going to be in 10 years, but I know we're heading in a great direction.
So if people see how animals are raised and killed, does that increase the chance of them becoming vegan?
It increases the chance of them becoming aware of something that runs counter to their values and that most people would not willingly support. So I would say yes. But as I said earlier, how they become aware, how they witness matters.
What prevents the food industry from becoming more healthy, conscious, and compassionate to animals, the planet, and people?
I mean, the food industry the industries are made up of people, and most people have inherited the carnistic mentality. And this is a mentality, as I said earlier, is organized around defenses and mythology, and it's reinforced over and over and over again, just about everywhere we turn throughout her entire lifetime, essentially. And so most people, of course, who are working in institutions are bringing this carnistic bias or this carnistic mentality with them. Carnism also conditions us to resist the very information that would help us get outside the box we don't even realize we're in. So when we encounter information that challenges our carnistic assumptions and beliefs, our biases, we tend to become resistant to that and to refute it. And you can see this in the way that people tend to respond to vegans and to communication about veganism. That said, people can and do change, and there is a shift. There is an increasing shift of awareness and of people in industries that are trying to work toward more vegan foods and more sustainable foods overall. That said, with industry, there's obviously also a vested interest in maintaining the carnistic status quo. There's it's big business. There's a lot of money to be made. More and more people who are advocating for healthier, more sustainable food choices are working with some of these companies to try to shift their production, not just what they're producing, but how they're producing foods and food products. So that's something to be hopeful about.